Hello, 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 cheers, Kevin here, and welcome back to Rimworld Out on the Ice Sheet, where we're currently playing host to some traders. I did unfortunately lose a small bit of footage between the previous episode and this one, though what you missed was a cargo pod landing of nutrient-paced meals and a few crashed spaceship parts. That did provide us with enough steel to build a smelter under the roof on the left of our base, which we've been using to get rid of our steel slag chunks. We are starting to build up a very decent amount of steel now, and we could make a fast push into orbital trading. The only thing holding me back at the moment is a lack of space. I'd like to be able to install the comms console without having to move our research bench outside. But on the other hand, if we're able to chew through the remaining research, the bench isn't going to do us much good anyway. But to kick things off proper today, Randy sends us a pair of man-hunting rats, which are not particularly dangerous, but are difficult to hit. It used to be that man-hunting creatures were just enraged and it would wear off after they slept, but more recently man-hunting creatures have a condition called scaria, which takes 5 days to kill the creature, keeping them in a frenzy all the while. It also accounts for the instant rotting on death that has prevented us from skinning the creature for leather thus far. My understanding is that it's not true 100% of the time, but thus far we've not gotten lucky with any maddened creatures. Unfortunately, I play things a little dangerous here, and one of the rats does manage to get a few scratches in. These wounds are entirely superficial unless they become infected. All the same, we should take every precaution, as we are very much alone out here. And it looks like our luck won't change on the Scaria front, which is a shame as it further delays our bedroll. But Rimworld giveth and Rimworld taketh away. It looks like we won't have to deal with any mood penalty as a psychic soothe washes over the colony. We are deep into Jugist, and that means it is raiding season, which does bring a question to mind for me. These raids are starting to get a little bit repetitive, and I do wonder whether that's something you enjoy watching, or whether we should limit those to only those raids that are notable for some reason. I am struggling a bit between balancing continuity and making sure you don't miss part of the story with a more supercut style of gameplay. Any feedback from you as to what you'd prefer would be greatly appreciated. Now, you may have noticed that we're not solely growing rice right now. With the temperature being warmer, we're losing fewer harvests, and we also have a backlog of nutrient-paced meals that came down in a cargo pod. Looking back at the footage, we actually started trying to grow fiber corn in that episode a little bit. Fiber corn is another means of getting wood, though it's unfortunately about 4 times slower than bonsai pots. This also means that when a solar flare strikes and knocks out our harvest, it's a bit more of a time loss than simple rice. We do get a visit from an exotic goods trader from Quarados, but unfortunately, they just don't have what we're looking for. We are starting to just barely get to the point where I'd like to keep some muffalo around, so we will definitely keep an eye out for that. We do also finally have enough wood for a second bonsai pot, which is great news, as they grow faster, don't require power, and also don't seem to be susceptible to cold snaps. In the meantime, Burke is continuing to smelt up our steel slag, and we're accumulating a pretty decent stockpile to the point where I am going to start planning some of our upcoming construction for when the wood is ready. We'll move the research bench and replace it with a comms console to allow us to contact passing ships, as well as build an orbital trade beacon to allow us to sell anything nearby. Another snow hare enters the map, which puts us tantalizingly close to the 40 leather we need. But until we get one piece more, Burke remains on the floor. Another raider comes calling, this one armed with a short bow, but we can encourage him to attack our Mechanoid rather than us, giving us the necessary time to take him out. Unfortunately, we don't really have time to celebrate our victory, as a blight has ruined this harvest of fiber corn. Again, I'm very pleased we have the bonsai pots to keep us going. Assuming we stay on top of harvesting them right away, each pot produces as much as an entire hydroponics basin. And just to avoid any temptation to invest our wood in more shelving, we do have Daedalus start to build our expanded wall as that wood comes in. Now we can welcome another bulk goods trader, this time from the Kantok League, and I was initially disappointed to see no unladen muffalo in tow. That disappointment was very short-lived, though, when I discovered that they have a bunch of wood for sale. We have been building up our wealth as a clothing reseller, and it's time for us to make a serious investment. We'll take all the wood they've got, as well as 40 cloth, and with those purchases made, we can finally both expand our base and give Burke the bedroll she's been so patiently waiting for. Now Daedalus is happily working away at our wooden wall, though unfortunately in a way that doesn't allow us to completely roof things over before we tear down our inner wall. Next we'll move the research bench, though we'll be polite and wait until Burke is done using it. From there we can add our comms console, and we will have to wait for passing ships to contact us before we can start trading, but the key thing here is those trades won't be limited by what a caravan can haul up to the ice sheet. We can finally expect to be able to buy heavy material that can be delivered via drop pod. Once that's assembled, we get an alert that we can now summon the Diabolus Mechanoid, which we can defeat to earn a signal chip. The signal chip is required to unlock larger mechanoids, so it is something we'll want to do eventually, but it's likely a rather dangerous fight as well, so I'm in no particular hurry. We're going to use some of our leftover wood to create another bonsai pot, as well as some more shelving. It will be incredible to finally have somewhere to store resources that doesn't cause it to deteriorate. This has mostly been cut out of the footage you've seen, but I have had to do a lot of manipulation of our storage areas to keep certain things inside or outside at the time that we need them, and I'm very excited to not do that anymore. We'll also prepare a bedroll for Burke using the cloth we purchased, which won't be the most comfortable, but does at least remove the slept-on-the-ground debuff that we've been suffering from for the prior year. We'll also move the dining table and stool to the back here, and this can be a bit more of Burke's personal area. We'll also move the horseshoe, as we're going to invest in a second heater. I can't find strong evidence of this, but I do suspect that we'll spend less energy over time by being able to maintain the heat of the room with 2 heaters, rather than having to reheat it repeatedly with one. If you happen to know whether this is true or false in Rimworld, please let me know down in the comments. We're also going to do some maneuvering, as I'd like to add another hydroponics bay. The key here is keeping all our electronics within range of the power conduits. I don't want to run the power through any of our flammable walls. And we do get another visit from the Cantok League. They do have more wood for sale, but given we do have our own means of production, I'd prefer to hold off and save our silver for space traders. You may have noticed that our third hydroponics bay is growing neither rice nor wood, but instead smoke leaf. My hope is to produce a bit that we can trade off, and to that effect we create a crafting spot and queue up some smoke leaf joints. As our colony improves its wealth, Burke's low expectation mood buff is going to decrease, so we take a moment to survey any mood challenges. At the moment we're suffering from 2 mood debuffs that have the same cause. Awful bedroom and unsightly environment are a result of a lack of beauty in the space, and if we enable the overlay we can see that storing items on the floor isn't the most inspirational. This does of course reinforce our need for more shelving. We do get another forced weather quest, this one offering us some plasteel for our trouble, and given plasteel's lack of flammability, we gladly accept. With that, we can start extending our front wall, building a flame-resistant channel for us to direct power. And I do get into some significant planning. I would like for us to build another room around the back of our nutrient-based dispenser. This room can be kept frozen, but by being indoors, we can toss tons of rice, meat, and anything else into the hoppers and leave them there indefinitely. With wind turbines to our east and the shoreline to our north, I suspect we'll be expanding westward a bit with our base, so we plan a bit of an insulated hallway and mark out which walls we want to be plasteel to ensure we can get power out this direction. And at last it is time. The event we've been waiting for has finally arrived as a bulk goods trader radios us on the comms console. We go ahead and answer and quickly realize that most of our trade goods are indoors, while our trade beacon is outdoors. Daedalus quickly moves things inside and we call them up again. And just like that, we have access to a ton of granite blocks. We'll sell a bunch of leathers, smoke leaf joints, and anything we've been able to accumulate, and from space, we get our delivery. I do realize at this point that we don't actually need our conduit walls to be made from plasteel. Stone walls are likewise safe. Now that we actually have a proper set of resources, we probably want to be a bit more greedy with our plasteel, as it's a useful resource for more advanced things down the line. We are going to have Daedalus immediately set to work on our food storage room. And as that wraps up, we're going to extend our roof area. I think it's finally time we took our first step in the Mechanitor portion of this playthrough, so we'll have Daedalus install a mech gestator. With that built, we can add a bill to create another mechanoid for our colony. The 3 that we don't have yet are a Melitor for fighting, an Agrahand for farming, and a Clean Sweeper for tidying. For the moment, Burke does seem to have cleaning and sewing in hand, so as much as I'd like to delegate more tasks, I think we should pursue a Melitor. Before we can get to that though, we get a raid from the Goo Gapop clan, and Beloin does have an auto pistol, so we find ourselves in a pretty extended shootout. Thankfully, the auto pistol will smelt down to provide us with some steel. We are a little shy of the 50 we need to birth our Mechanoid into existence, and after extracting Daedalus to build a new stool out of granite, we can recover the remaining steel we need. With that, we'll send Burke out to begin the construction. Randy tries to distract us with yet another paralytic Ablasia colonist, but we're busy and we can deal with that later. We can see that the gestation process has begun, and in about 2.5 days we'll see our new Mechanoid. Randy says no, though, and causes a discharge in our power grid. We've got a fire to put out. And while it's easy enough for us to deal with, it does mean we lose a harvest to the cold. With us already being in Decemberry, I really should be switching us over to multiple hydroponic bays focused on rice, at least until we have a sufficient stockpile, but it grows so fast that losing a single harvest won't really cause an issue. As we wait for the gestation to complete, Randy causes one of our wind turbines to break down, but we've got plenty of parts to spare. Shortly after that, Randy sends another disaster our way, this time in the form of a solar flare. And I will say that solar flare is starting to really compete with Zzzt for my least favorite event. We don't have enough of a stockpile of wood to start a campfire, so there's not much for us to do but stay indoors and preserve what heat we can. Randy sends a flash storm next, but his aim is off and our colony is spared. And having pushed through Randy's little tantrum and converted our hydroponics basins over to rice, it is finally time to bring our new Mechanoid into the world. Say hello to our adorable little Militor. It will of course be needing a name, and I eagerly await your suggestions down in the comments. The Militor will need to share a control group with either Daedalus or Sisyphus for now, as without our headset on we're limited to only 2 control groups. You may have noticed, however, that despite the events being over, the wind has slowed and our batteries are drained. That means we are destined to lose yet another harvest, and we do not have anything left in reserve. We do have Burke turn off the smelter, comm station, mech gestator, and really anything we can keep unpowered to ensure we maximize the energy available for heat and sun lampage, but it's a real question of whether we can do things quickly enough. I'm going to have Daedalus spend our granite on double walling our home. I don't expect it to save us too much energy, but it should give us a bit more breathing room during a power outage if Randy decides another solar flare is on offer. We are going to keep Burke researching in order to keep her mood up, and will unforbid the survival meals for now since the rice is still a little ways away. And unfortunately, while Daedalus is moving the mech gestator, he leaves behind the toxic waste packs generated by constructing our Militor. We do very much need to make sure that these do not decay, as they will leach toxins into the environment and cause us a very bad time. Of course, instructing Sisyphus to prioritize that, as opposed to random gear, requires a bit of micromanagement. I'm very much looking forward to the point where we have enough storage and mech recharging power that we can keep these machines always on, so there's not a backlog of work every time we wake someone up. And with some rice more than 80% grown, we will mark it for harvesting. And Burke dutifully harvests the rice and takes it to the hopper. Unfortunately, it seems she grabs some rice for herself in her hungry state and consumes it raw. Now, this wouldn't be the end of the world, except that she does manage to get food poisoning in the process. That's going to depress her mood and increase her appetite over the next day or so it's critical we get things harvested. And just to be safe, I'm keeping Burke drafted while Sisyphus hauls the rice to the hopper to ensure Burke doesn't try the same thing again. As soon as she's released, she does get a proper meal from the paste dispenser, but we are warned she's at a major break risk. Mental breaks can be incredibly dangerous here, as she might simply decide to go wandering around outside, far away from the food she desperately needs. Unfortunately, before she can get the meal down, she vomits all over, making her hunger even worse. And despite trying to get things down again, she does succumb to a mental break. It appears that Burke is going on a smoke leaf binge, which all in all is far better than I was afraid of. Amusingly enough, Burke still finishes her meal, so the starvation issue is not an immediate concern. I do briefly toy with the idea of trying to play keep away with the smoke leaf, but better to just let her get this out of her system. Or at least, so I thought. As soon as Burke partakes, we get the alert that for a solo colonist playthrough usually means the game is over. Colonist needs rescue. Taking a look at her health tab, Burke is at 29% consciousness and can't move, manipulate, talk, or eat. And to our horror, we learn that mechanoids controlled by a downed colonist can't actually be controlled at all. So there's nothing our robots can do to help the situation either. All we can do is wait. Incredibly, Burke gets back up, and after sleeping it off, is feeling much better. In fact, with the catharsis from her binge, she's in the best mood we've seen all series. Life lesson for us, we should always have a stockpile of non-nutrient-based food available so we avoid this whole catastrophe. Next, we get some cargo pods with a bit of flake, which we'll accept both for the money and for the steel slag that comes with it. And a slave ship is in comm range, not someone we want to buy from, but certainly someone we can sell to. We don't want to be selling as frequently as we can, not just because it clears up space, but because our sell price is going to be below market value, we're going to lose some money. The raids that we get are going to be based on our colony wealth, however, so if we're going to lose money, it's better to lose money early and encourage Randy to send us weaker raiders. Speaking of raids, I do spend a bit of time planning out what walls for our base might look like. We do unfortunately need to plan on walling the back of our base in, because the shallow water is still traversable and not something we can build on. Once we start to have a surplus of building material, we can build ourselves some proper defenses that give us more of an advantage in combat. And a volcanic winter sets in, which does promise to keep things dark and cold for a while, but at this point we're quite used to that, and it shouldn't impact us very much. Despite the negative 70-degree temperature, the trash rig is here again, and they are attacking immediately. They have melee weapons, steel ones at that, and I think it's time to put our new Mechanitor to the test. And a few things become apparent. The range on the Mechanitor is less than phenomenal, and their speed isn't anything to write home about either. And it's down. Hard to tell if it really contributed, or if Burke's shooting is really doing more of the heavy lifting. Nevertheless, we are going to deputize our worker bots for melee. Perhaps they can teach our Mechanitor how it's done. And score 1 for Daedalus. We'll send Burke out to do some repairs on our Mechanitor to get it back in fighting shape. I do think it would be helpful for us to have some cover next time, so I start marking out the edges of our wall with dotted lines of granite blocks. We don't have enough material to complete anything, but at least we can use the walls for some maneuvering. And as we're doing that, a bulk goods trader radios in. We will take some steel and some limestone blocks this time and see what we can do about shoring up those walls. I have been skipping over changes in our research project for the most part, but just to check in here, we've wrapped up a good deal of what's available to us. We'll continue, mostly because it gives Burke a consistent and reliable mood bonus, and hey, if we ever have to abandon our colony, perhaps geothermal research might be useful on another map. Another illness sets in as Burke develops the flu, but with her super immunity trait we can mostly ignore this. Her immunity stat wildly outpaces the development of the disease, so as long as we keep her mood up, it's a non-event. And as we wrap up for today, Burke is engaging in another jubilee of ideology, marking the passage of yet another year out here on the ice sheet. We are starting slowly to build ourselves a home here, full of all of the amenities we could want. Nutrient-based, endless research, and bonsai trees. But with that, I'll thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave your name suggestions down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!